Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into, well, a truly seismic event in motorsport history, the 1955 Le Mans disaster.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but incredibly important.
Absolutely. So picture this. June 11th, 1955, the legendary Circuit de la Sarthe in Le Mans, France.
The 24-hour race.
Exactly. And during that race, this catastrophic crash happened. We're talking 83 spectators killed, plus the French driver Pierre Levet.
And around 120 more injured. It's just
Yeah.
the worst ever in motorsport.
Still is. And the immediate impact was huge, right? Multiple countries in Europe banned motorsport straight away.
Switzerland's ban lasted until, 2022? Just
It
incredible.
really is. So our mission in this deep dive is to really get under the skin of what happened. The factors leading up to it, the crash itself second by second, and the long-term consequences.
Definitely. Because it wasn't just sheer bad luck. It was this convergence of factors. Understanding it tells you so much about how racing safety evolved and, frankly, why it had to evolve.
Okay, let's set the scene then. The anticipation for the 55 race was massive. You had the big three, really. Ferrari, Jaguar, Mercedes-Benz. All previous winners, all bringing new cars.
Ferrari were the defending champs. Super fast cars, but maybe a reputation for being a bit fragile.
Yeah, a little bit. And then Jaguar. They were almost entirely focused on winning Le Mans, weren't they?
Absolutely. It was the race for them. Very experienced drivers, too, like Mike Hawthorne, who was actually also driving F1 for Ferrari then.
And the key thing about the Jags, the brakes.
Disc brakes. Advanced stuff for the time. Really crucial detail, that one.
Definitely. And then there was Mercedes-Benz.
Right. Coming off their F1 success, debuting the brand new 300 SLR for the World Sports Car Championship.
The car Sterling Moss had just smashed the Mille Miglia record in.
That's the one. An incredible machine. Very lightweight magnesium alloy body electron, they called it.
But the brakes were different from the Jaguar.
Totally different. This is key. Mercedes stuck with inboard drum brakes. Big ones, but still drums. And they added that air brake, the flap behind the driver.
To create drag, help slow the car down.
Exactly. But fundamentally, not disc brakes like Jaguar had. So you've got this contrast in technology playing out right there.
It really highlights the different approaches they were taking.
For sure.
And the Mercedes driver lineup. Wow. Team boss Alfred Neubauer put together a sort of dream team.
You had Fangio and Moss in one car.
Doesn't get much better. Then Carl Kling with Andre Simon and the American John Fitch paired with Pierre Levet.
And Levet. People remembered him from 52, right? That heroic near solo drive that almost won it for Mercedes before.
Exactly. So huge pressure on that team. Immense expectations.
So you've got these cutting-edge cars, top drivers pushing everything to the limit. But then there's the track, Circuit de la Sarthe.
Still basically the same layout as in 1923.
Pretty much. Minor tweaks, yeah. But fundamentally designed for cars topping out around, 100 kilometers an hour?
And by 55, speeds were hitting over 270 kilometers down the Mulsanne.
It's a massive difference. Okay, they'd resurfaced it after the war, widened bits, rebuilt the pits and grandstands.
But crucially, no real barrier between the pit lane and the racing line.
None. Just open. And between the track and the spectators.
Just a small earth bank, about 4 feet high.
Can you even imagine that today? Cars flying past at 170 mile per hour plus, and that's all protecting the crowd.
It seems utterly insane by modern standards. And another thing, no seatbelts in the cars.
Yeah, that's hard to wrap your head around now. The thinking then was it was better to be thrown clear in a crash, especially with the risk of fire.
A grim calculation.
It really highlights a completely different safety philosophy. Risk was just accepted differently, I suppose. Much more focus on the driver managing it rather than systemic safety.
So the race starts. Saturday, 4 p.m., and it's immediately flat out. Castellotti in the Ferrari, Hawthorne in the Jag, Fangio in the Mercedes.
Trading the lead, breaking lap records right from the off, already lapping slower cars.
And the accident happens at 6:26 p.m., end of lap 35. Just as the leaders are starting to think about their first pit stops.
Right, so you've got this intense battle, incredible speeds on this outdated track with minimal safety. It's just...
Yeah.
The stage is set.
This is where it gets really complex, the sequence of events.
Absolutely critical to follow closely. So Hawthorne and Fangio are battling hard. Hawthorne had seen the signal from his pit crew a lap earlier, pit next lap.
He just lapped Levet, who was running 6th after Arnage Corner. He's trying to keep Fangio behind him.
Definitely. Then, coming out of Mason Blanche towards the main straight, Hawthorne catches Lance Macklin in the slower Austin Healey 100S.
Macklin sees him coming, moves right to let him pass.
Hawthorne goes by, laps Macklin just as they hit the straight. Then Hawthorne signals, raises his hand, and cuts right towards the pits.
And this is where those Jaguar disc brakes become absolutely pivotal.
He brakes hard, very hard, to scrub off all that speed for the pit entry, but the track layout here is also critical.
Two things, right? No proper deceleration lane for the pits.
None. And just before the straight where he braked, there is that slight right-hand kink in the road.
So Macklin, in the Austin Healey, suddenly sees Hawthorne braking right in front of him and cutting across. He has to slam on his brakes, too.
Hard. His car goes slightly off the track edge on the right, throws up dust.
And then he swerves left. Now, whether that was just instinct, or he lost some control on the verge, or maybe his drum brakes pulled unevenly, we don't know for sure.
Whatever the reason, he swerves sharply left, back towards the middle of the track.
Right into the path of Pierre Levay in the Mercedes 300 SLR.
Who's coming up much, much faster, over 200 kilometers an hour. Fangio is right behind Levay, waiting to pass.
Levay has absolutely no time.
Almost none. But in that split second, it seems he raised his hand, maybe a warning to Fangio behind him.
An incredible, potentially life-saving gesture for Fangio.
Almost certainly. Fangio, with unbelievable reflexes, just managed to scrape through the chaos. He even slightly clipped Hawthorne's Jaguar, which was slowing right down for the pits by then.
But Levay couldn't avoid Macklin.
No. His front right wheel hit Macklin's rear left. It acted like a ramp.
Launched the Mercedes into the air.
Completely airborne, flying, tumbling, end over end for maybe 80 meters over that low earth bank.
Levay was thrown out.
Ejected from the car as it broke apart. His skull was crushed on impact, died instantly.
Just horrific. And the car itself.
The trajectory, because of that slight kink in the road, sent it straight towards the packed spectator terraces and the grandstand.
It landed on the embankment, bounced, hit a concrete stairwell structure.
And just disintegrated. The heavy parts, engine block, radiator, front suspension, carried on like missiles into the crowd for nearly 100 meters.
Crushing people. And the bonnet!
The bonnet was ripped off and flew into the crowd like a guillotine was one description, decapitating people packed tightly together.
Oh my God. People on ladders, scaffolding in the underpass to the pits. They were directly in the path.
Duncan Hamilton, the Jaguar driver, saw it from the pit wall. He described the scene as just indescribable, dead and dying everywhere. The screams. He said he just stood there horrified.
I can't even begin to imagine.
And then what was left of Levay's car, where it landed on the berm, the fuel tank ruptured.
Exploded.
Yeah.
And that magnesium alloy bodywork.
Magnesium burns incredibly hot, and tragically, when rescuers arrived, they likely didn't know how to handle a magnesium fire, pouring water on it.
Makes it worse, right? Much hotter.
Exactly. Yeah. Intense white flames showering the track and the crowd with burning embers. The wreckage burned for hours.
And Macklin's Austin Healey.
His car was heavily damaged. It hit the barrier on the left, then shot across the track right into the pit lane.
Narrowly missed other cars there.
Yeah, incredibly lucky it didn't cause another pileup. It slammed into the unprotected pit wall near the Cunningham and Mercedes pits, injured a few people there, officials, a photographer.
Then bounced back across the track again.
Yeah, hit the fence on the other side. Amazingly, Macklin himself climbed out basically unhurt, jumped clear.
Just unbelievable survival in the middle of all that.
Meanwhile, Hawthorne, he was obviously distraught. He had actually overshot his pit box initially.
Thinking he'd caused it all.
Understandably. When he did eventually stop next lap, he was, well, shattered. His teammates had to take over. Ivor Bueb apparently was very reluctant after seeing what had happened.
And John Fitch, Levay's co-driver.
He was waiting to take over. He was actually standing with Levay's wife, Denise Bouillon, when it happened. They saw the whole thing.
Oh, that's awful.
Fitch said later he saw Levay's body burned on the track. He stayed with Madame Levay, tried to comfort her. Then about half an hour later, realized he needed to call his family in the U.S.
So tell them he wasn't the one driving.
Exactly. And when he got to the media center, he overheard a reporter saying 48 deaths were already confirmed. That's when the scale of it really hit him.
Just devastating.
Fitch went straight back to the Mercedes pit and urged them to withdraw. Said it would be a PR disaster to continue, whatever the result.
Team manager Neubauer agreed.
He did. But he needed the okay from Stuttgart, from Mercedes headquarters.
But the race director, Charles Theroux, he kept the race going.
Yeah, that was, and still is, hugely controversial. His reasons, well, they sound pretty thin today.
What were they?
He worried about spectators leaving en masse and blocking roads for ambulances, potential lawsuits from teams if he stopped it. He even invoked this idea of the rough law of sport, meaning the race must go on.
That sounds quite callous given the circumstances.
It does. He even cited the Farnborough Airshow crash from '52 as some kind of precedent and claimed he didn't have the authority anyway, only the local prefect did.
How do people view that decision now?
Still very divisive. Modern thinking would almost certainly demand a stop out of respect to manage the emergency. It really shows a different mindset back then.
So Mercedes eventually did withdraw.
Yeah, Neubauer got the call from Stuttgart. They decided to pull out just before midnight, but he waited until about 1:45 a.m. to actually call the cars in.
When fewer spectators were around.
Seems so. They were running first and third at the time, just quietly retired them. No big announcement.
And their chief engineer, Uhlenhaut, he asked Jaguar to withdraw too.
He did. Went to their pit, suggested it as a mark of respect. But the Jaguar team manager, Lofty England, refused.
So Jaguar raced on.
They did. With Mercedes gone and the Ferraris all having dropped out with mechanical problems earlier, Jaguar basically had no competition left.
Hawthorne and Babe won.
By 5 laps over an Aston Martin. But obviously no celebration. The mood was incredibly somber. Even the weather turned grim on Sunday.
But there was that photo controversy, wasn't there? Hawthorne on the podium.
Yes. A press photo showed him smiling, drinking champagne. A French magazine, L'Auto Journal, published it with a really cutting caption. A votre santé, Monsieur Hawthorne?
To your health, Mr. Hawthorne. Ouch, that's brutal.
It caused quite a stir, added to the controversy surrounding him.
So the final toll, just awful. 80 to 84 dead, including Levet.
And somewhere between 120 and nearly 180 injured. Flying debris, the fire. It's still the worst crash in motorsport history by far.
A special mass was held afterwards for the victims.
The reaction everywhere was just shock, grief, and outrage. Immediate bans on racing in France, Spain, Switzerland, West Germany.
Until safety improved. And in the U.S.
The AAA, the main governing body since forever, basically got out of motorsport altogether, dissolved their contest board, said racing was too dangerous and didn't fit their mission.
So the USAC was formed to take over.
Exactly.
Most countries lifted their bans within a year or so, right? As new rules came in. France issued new regulations pretty quickly.
Yeah, by September '55. But Switzerland, that ban on circuit racing stuck for decades.
Until 2022, as you said. Incredible. Any Swiss racing had to happen in other countries?
And other big races were canceled that year, too. The Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers, the Carrera Panamericana in Mexico.
And Mercedes pulled out of motorsport completely at the end of '55.
They did, after winning the championship. Though reports suggest that decision might have already been made internally before Le Mans.
And several drivers who were there never raced at Le Mans again. Fitch, Macklin, even Fangio.
Understandable, really. At the track itself, the pit straight grandstands were torn down and rebuilt.
And the track layout changed.
Yes, over the next year, the ACO, the organizers, made significant changes. Widened the pit straight, got rid of that kink before the pits, built a proper deceleration lane.
Rebuilt the pits complex entirely.
Yep, more space for teams, but actually reduced the grid size. And the main grandstand was rebuilt with new terraces and, crucially, a ditch separating spectators from the track. A direct response to what happened.
But overall, safety improvements across motorsport were slow to come after this.
Surprisingly slow, yeah. It really took another decade or more. And tragedies like the deaths of Lorenzo Bandini and Jim Clark for Jackie Stewart's safety campaign in F1 to really gain traction and force major changes.
But John Fitch, Levet's co-driver, he became a real safety advocate, didn't he?
Lifelong advocate for motorsport safety, road car safety, highway safety. He invented several things still used today, like those yellow Fitch barrels filled with sand you see on highways.
Absorbing impact. Wow. What about Macklin's Austin Healey, the car that started it all?
Amazingly, it survived, sold a few times, eventually turned up at auction in 2011.
And sold for a lot.
A huge amount. Over 800,000 pounds. It's been restored back to how it was in 1955.
Incredible piece of history, albeit a tragic one. Now, the blame game. That must have been intense.
Oh, massively. Highly emotional. Mercedes and Macklin basically pointed the finger at Hawthorne, said his sudden move and braking caused Macklin to swerve into Levet.
And Jaguar.
They sort of questioned Macklin's and Levet's experience or competence. Initial media reports were all over the place, lots of speculation.
Like the fuel additive theory?
Yeah, totally unfounded. That fire was down to the magnesium bodywork, plain and simple. But opinions among drivers who were there were divided then, and honestly still are among those still around.
And Macklin sued Hawthorne.
He did, over Hawthorne's autobiography, which came out in '58. Macklin felt Hawthorne tried to absolve himself without actually naming a cause, which Macklin felt implied he was to blame, especially with Levet dead.
So he launched a libel suit.
Yes, but it never went to trial. Hawthorne himself died in a road accident in early '59.
Wow, what grim irony. Was he driving a Jaguar?
He was overtaking a Mercedes-Benz, believe it or not.
Unbelievable. So what did the official inquiry conclude?
The French government inquiry interviewed everyone, examined the wreckage. Their final conclusion was that no single driver was specifically responsible. They called it a terrible racing incident.
A result of circumstances.
Exactly. But they placed the primary blame for the massive loss of spectator life squarely on the inadequate safety standards of the track itself, the layout, the lack of protection.
And it came out that concerns had been raised before.
Yeah, apparently drivers had raised concerns about the pit straight dangers as early as 1953, 2 years before.
That makes it even more tragic.
It really does.
So the 1955 Le Mans disaster, undeniably a watershed moment. It changed motorsport forever, didn't it? Safety regulations, track design, just the whole approach to risk.
Absolutely. And even though the official inquiry didn't blame one driver, it's clear when you look back, it was this perfect storm, wasn't it? The old track layout, the different braking technologies, that Jaguar disc versus Mercedes drum brake contrast was huge, and the split-second decisions of drivers under immense pressure.
All came together in the worst possible way.
It's just a constant, stark reminder of the risks involved in racing at that level and why the drive for better safety for drivers and spectators never stops. It has to be continuous.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. How do you think the evolution of safety in motorsport, driven by tragedies like this, has actually impacted the fan experience? And maybe even the fundamental nature of racing itself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Does making it safer change the appeal? Does it alter the spectacle? Definitely something to chew on.